Welcome back. A new survey is revealing how Hawaii residents feel about housing, the military, and rail, and how well the state is handling challenges. Annalisa Burgos has this exclusive preview.
Federal cuts in 2025 hurt folks already struggling with high costs of housing, food, and insurance. And with a recession expected this year, the winter 2025 Hawaii Perspectives report shows residents want government leaders to act now to keep locals home.
I have an older niece and nephew, and both have moved to Arizona because of it. They just can't afford a home here. Hard to make ends meet and have a nice home for their families.
This exodus is not a new trend, but Pacific Resource Partnership's Hawaii Perspectives report shows many locals have had enough. 75% of more than 900 residents surveyed across the islands say government red tape is blocking housing construction. The bottleneck is worsening a current shortage of 64,000 affordable homes. The majority of respondents want policies to build more housing, including setting time limits on building permitting and reviews, creating rent-to-own programs, building near public transit stations, and increasing building height limits for certain areas. 60% support government using condemnation powers to enable affordable housing.
There just needs to be a prioritization of well-being over having a country or more aesthetic choice in our infrastructure in our communities.
Most surveyed support the government using bonds to finance housing construction rather than raising taxes.
53% of residents say that the government should pay for infrastructure for new housing because you can't have new housing without infrastructure. And when the home builder is forced to pay for that infrastructure, that's roads, sewer, water, electricity, that can add as much as $200,000 to the price of a home, which is more than a down payment.
PRP's fifth iteration of the report also found folks feel slightly better about the state's direction. Pessimism fell from 53% to 47%.
We have our elected leaders trying to tackle this affordability crisis, and that historic tax cut for state taxes, I think, really did a lot in kind of encouraging people to be a little bit more optimistic.
Other findings in this year's survey, nearly 90% say the military is important to Hawaii's economy, and 59% believe the military should build more housing on its bases to ease pressure on the civilian market. 88% of Oahu residents want to keep the rail tax surcharge rather than raise property taxes. If you're feeling down about your finances, you're not alone. The survey shows more folks are pessimistic. A third expect to be worse off financially, up from a quarter just a year ago. For a free digital copy of the Hawaii Perspectives report, visit prp-hawaii.com. Annalisa Burgos, Hawaii News Now.